What's a hobby that's dying in popularity? I'm a coin collector. It's dying. Model rocketry. When I was a kid, we all built and glued and fired off model rockets with rocket engines and stuff. Stamp collecting. It used to be a huge thing but not anymore. Probably because of the rise of email, very few people send letters anymore. They have them at estate sales all the time for super cheap. Ham radio. I remember as a kid listening to my dad's radio and him always having a good time and genuinely enjoying a good rag chew. I got my license and tuned into some of the local repeaters, found some nets with the most depressing things I've ever heard. People talking about their terminal illnesses or how prescription costs are killing them. This might be a bit controversial, but since I do this, I'll mention it because that's how I feel. Playing drums, real drums. MIDI is making us obsolete, don't get me wrong. There are still applications for live drums, especially if you want the groove or feel of a live drummer, but bedroom music production has just skyrocketed even more due to the pandemic, and not everyone has enough space for a full acoustic kit. Postcard collecting. I buy a postcard of each place I visit. Some places I have visited in the world. Very hard to find a postcard. Hardest country. As we're only here for a day on a cruise, Dominica. I'm surprised this hasn't come up, but China, crystal collections. Another one would be sterling silver, tea sets, cutlery etc. Slot cars. In the UK it is 100% croquet. I know what a cliché. When I was younger everyone had a croquet set and it was a great way to enjoy time with friends on a summer day in the garden. Whereas now I don't know anyone that still owns one. Maybe a strange one, but this question got me thinking. Model trains. There is a store in our town square that has been there for like 50 years that specializes in model trains. It's called a train and toy store, but there are almost no toys there. The store is interesting to walk around in, if you are not claustrophobic. But he must not sell very much because he can't pay the rent anymore. He is closing and moving out of town to some building he owns. Again, the stuff looks cool but I have never seen anyone buy anything. Geocaching, which is weird because I still do it sometimes while biking around. But caching apps rarely alert me of any finders in the apps now. I put $20 in what used to be a super popular cache that people would visit daily like 15 years ago. I later turned. About 6 months later and the same items including the $20 were in there. Pen pals. As a teenager, I loved writing letters to new people and receiving letters from all over the country and the world. Everything is instant now. But nothing beats that feeling of getting a letter in the mail that is specifically for you. That is not a bill. Ad circular and comes from someone that genuinely wants to brighten your day. Historical reenacting. Folks no longer want to play dress up in itchy wool and educate folks on whatever period was their jam. Its heyday was late 90s when you could find a group that did just about any period you could imagine. Coercion beanie babies. Collecting all 50 US state minted quarters. I remember there used to be TV commercials selling you fancy cardboard with holes in them to help you collect them all. Lol. Oh, how times have changed. Building model airplanes. Flying kites never see that sit anymore. Wingsuit flying used to be really popular but then many of them died and it quickly fell out of popularity. Indoor roller skating rinks. Edit. Skating has become popular. Yes. But weirdly the number of roller skating rinks seems to be going down. The 4 within 25 miles of me closed down over the last 15 years. I don't know of any new ones and I'm not sure where to go in New England to find an operating rink nowadays. Meanwhile there's lots of private outdoor groups. It must just be too expensive to have the square footage to support a roller skating rink in an urban area. General aviation, being a private pilot. A series of lawsuits against plane manufacturers combined with insane certification requirements for airplanes and parts have made it so that buying new planes or replacement parts is ludicrously expensive for pretty much anyone earning less than $500 per year. Old used aircraft from the heyday of the 60s to 80s had been filling the void to an extent over the years. But they are starting to get really worn out and people feel less and less comfortable flying them as time goes on. And unfortunately there's just no replacements as they age out. As an example, a brand new Cessna 172 in 1969 cost $12.500, about $90 in today's money. Today, a 2021 model would cost around $400. Flying radio-controlled helicopters and airplanes. Why would someone want to deal with all the hassle of flying a model helicopter? That is insanely difficult to fly. When they can buy a DJI drone that has a first-person video stream, records video in 4K, and can fly around by itself via GPS? Yo-yo. Tatting lace. Bridge. Super complex game. Has layers and layers of rules, and it's dead. Drag racing. The vehicle kind. A major track in Georgia just got sold because of a local battery plant is being built nearby and the houses around it skyrocketed in value. Edit. Since there was confusion. The plant apparently has 50k jobs, so all local residential areas spiked for families moving here for the job as it's only a few minutes drive but far enough away that it isn't an eyesight either. Paintball. Teacher here. Hobbies in general are dying. Here's part of why. I regularly meet parents who balk at the idea of their child doing something for fun. Unless it can translate to a career or a college application, it's viewed as a waste of time and money. And if it can translate to one of those, then there is crushing, constant pressure to be the best at it. We are raising a generation of children who cannot comprehend of hobbies. Not sure if it was a real hobby, but typewriting will die out eventually. The last typewriters factory closed some years ago. Ceramics. There used to be 2 or 3 shops in every small town, where you could go, pick a piece, clean it, they would fire it for you, then go back a week later and paint it. They fire it for you again, then you go and pick up your finished masterpiece. It was so refreshing. The Rotary Club, the Elks, the Masons, the League of Women Voters. All kinds of fraternal organizations. Beyond that, participation in all kinds of civic organizations. Churches, labor unions, sports leagues, hobbyist clubs are way down from previous generations. Americans used to be world-renowned for their enthusiastic participation in clubs and civic organizations of all kinds. Now we're becoming an increasingly atomized society. The cost is that today the average American has fewer closer friends, is less likely to know their neighbors, and has less of an informal support network than at any point in history. Scrapbooking. No one prints pictures anymore. Model trains. The hobby is absolutely dead. Entire train collections are being sold for literal pennies on the dollar. An engine that used to cost $500 may not even sell for $5. Collecting spoons. I'm a teenager, yet I often enjoy finding spoons at cool tourist attractions. My personal favorite is one I got from Prague during Christmas time. It has a revolving dice in the handle. Wiffle ball. Every boy from 8 to 13 had one. Racquetball. Ventriloquism. Hobbies. I feel like everything has to be a side hustle now, and people don't just do sit for fun anymore. Swing dancing got really popular for a while in the late 90s. Haven't heard much about that in a long time. Based on young people I know. Bowling. Billiards and poker are fading. Board games was experiencing a boom until COVID. D&D is super popular again. Bell ringing. In countries with bell towers, I know not everywhere has them. Model airplanes. My papa was a fanatic from childhood to death. We still have hundreds of boxes and already made planes to figure out what to do with. He was avid in groups and conventions. Every single group and gathering where men no younger than 50. It literally is dying off each passing year as the years go on and more members lost. At least in the area my papa was in. Actually playing trading card games, not just investing in the most hyped set. Kite flying. One of the oldest hobbies. Kites were used for a lot of things since ancient times. I want to fly kites, but there's not enough space in the city, or the right wind conditions sometimes. I want to say boxing. I feel like boxing isn't as popular compared to the 80s and 90s. Flying balsa models. They're supplanted by bind and go and drones. Sometimes I feel like today's hobbies are yesteryear's craftsmen. Blacksmithing, bow making, and coopering are all examples. It seems a lot of handcrafting arts are fading. Comic book stores have basically had to load the store up with trading cards, Funko Pops, and tchotchkes to survive, while the actual comic books get cast into a small corner. The Marvel and DC movies may make billions, but it's done zero to increase interest in the comics themselves. Having a materialistic hobby. Anytime something becomes popular, they just raise the prices until the average person can't afford to do it anymore and prevents anyone else getting into it, even when it's not materialistic. I got back into birding recently and keep being asked why I don't have decent binoculars and camera. Sorry. Using my eyes is part of the challenge I like and don't need to spend thousands on tech. Square dancing is quite literally dying. Average age of any tip is about 65 plus. Good collars are a rarity. Falconry. Highly regulated from state to state and a large upkeep cost in both money and time. But I'll be damned if it isn't cool as frock. I live in Northern California wine country, about 60 miles north of San Francisco. And around here, golf. Even though we have a huge footprint of retired people, all the local golf courses are slowly going under. Might be because a loop is like $120 during the week and $200 on a weekend. I don't know if it's dying in popularity, but beekeeping has definitely undergone a shift in my lifetime. It used to be that every farm you drove past had a small hive or two tucked away somewhere. It was a side crop in the many crops that were grown. Now it's got a pretty large initial investment cost and you see more beekeepers that are young people with a garden in their backyard. It's expensive and time-consuming and frequently puzzling. It's also occasionally painful and sometimes heartbreaking. I still love it, though. Model railroading. Unfortunately, once called the world's greatest hobby, model railroading has become a dying hobby. The prices of models are expensive, and the younger generation can't afford them. Not to mention, in my opinion, trains just aren't as cool as they were in the golden age of steam and beyond. Most of the locomotives these days just look about the same as one another. Hacky sack? Was that a thing anywhere else but 90s California? Lol. Barbershop quartetting. For as long as I've been in the society, the membership prices and convention registrations have always been way too expensive for something you don't even need an instrument for. And there aren't as many conventions a year as I think there should be because it's probably just too hard to justify the administrative costs. There's a ton of us, just not enough to make the scene really shine outside of the really big events. Watching horse races at the Downs. I guarantee that entire sport will disappear in like 50 years. Dunno if these quite count, but skateboarding and also forming a terrible band with you and your friends in your garage. Model making. Dirt bike riding. With the constant closure of areas to ride, rising prices on bikes used and new, and the boom and ease in riding, using ATVs and UTVs, dirt bikes are being pushed out. Can't remember the last time I went out for a ride and saw more than one or two other people on two wheels versus dozens on four. Thrifting. It's all bought up by resellers for online shops or flat out doesn't exist anymore. I remember not even 10 years ago I could walk into Flashbacks on 5th and Hillcrest and flip through dozens of retro disco polyester shirts and baggy faded 90s tees. Now you go to Goodwill and it's all fast fashion mall crap. Working on your own car. I'm talking engine, clutches, bodywork. I spend a lot of time on IRC and, as we've been saying in IRC circles for about 20 years now, IRC is dying. Sports card collecting conventions used to be a huge thing. Now maybe a few gray hairs get together to trade, buy, and sell model trains. Who has the space or the time anymore? Building Thurmans at home. Ham radio. Tuner cars. Yes, the community still exists, but the days of throwing a cold air intake and some springs on your Civic are long gone. And it's only for people with deep pockets now. It doesn't help that the supply of affordable, lightweight, entry-level performance cars is basically zero now, and the ones left over from the 90s and early 00 are so supply constrained you need to be able to produce at least $10,000 in cash just to buy one anymore. Never mind the cost of parts has gone up substantially too. I'm holding out hope that the first gen BRZ, FRS, 86 ends up bringing it back somewhat, but they're not cheap enough. Still around $15,000 for something with 80K on it, nor produced in large enough numbers. Prank phone calls are a dying art form. Pretty soon kids won't even get it.